transparency. Why not push for the release of any documents with Tara Reid's name on them?
So far, I do have to give credit to, like, the questions here have not been bad for me because she's getting him on the record and pushing him hard, especially in this University of Delaware stuff.
Personnel documents. I mean, you can't do that. You wouldn't, for example, if you worked with me or I worked for you and you had my income tax returns, you had my whatever. They're private documents. They're not for the, they don't get put out in the public. So they're not part of the public record that in fact is that any senator or vice president or president has in their documents. Look, there was one place that she could file the complaint. And and that office at the time was all those records from that office are in the archives, and they're controlled by the Senate. That's where personnel documents would be if they exist. That's where the complaint would be if it exists.
Given the fact that you have said in the past that if a woman goes under the lights and talks about something like this, we have to consider that the essence of this is real. Is the essence of what she is saying is real? Why do you think she's doing this?
I'm not going to question her motive. I'm not going to get into that at all. I don't know why she's saying this. I don't know why after 27 years, all of a sudden this gets raised. I don't understand it. But I'm not going to go in and question her motive. I'm not going to attack her. She has a right to say whatever she wants to say. But I have a right to say, look at the facts, check it out, find out whether any of what she says is asserted or true. And based on the investigations that have taken place so far, to the best of my knowledge, by two major papers, they interviewed dozens of my staff members, not just senior staff, but staff members, I'm told, at least that's what they said. And nobody, this was not the atmosphere in my office at all. No one has ever said anything like this.
But, Mr. Vice President, as it pertained to Dr. Ford, everyone wanted, high-level Democrats said she should be believed, that they believed it happened. You said if someone like Dr. Ford were to come out, the essence of what she is saying has to be believed.
And what about all the people that corroborated her story? The many, many people, her friends, her neighbors, her mom on Larry King Live, all that stuff.
Because the facts are that, look, I'm not suggesting she had no right to come forward. And I'm not saying any woman, they should come forward. They should be heard. And then it should be investigated. It should be investigated. And if there's anything that that is consistent with what's being said, and she makes the case or the case is made, then it should be believed. But ultimately, the truth matters. The truth matters. It's period. I fought my entire life to change the whole notion of the law and the cultural around sexual assault. And I fought to strengthen and protect the process for survivors. I believe that we've come a long way, and we have a long way to go in this system before we, in fact, are in a position that there's a fair and unbiased view. But at the end of the day, it has to be looked at. These claims are not true. There's no cooperation. I mean, they're not true.
Mr. Vice President,
I don't know what else I can say to you.
Well, I'm going to try and ask many different ways. Stacey Abrams said during the Kavanaugh hearings, I believe women, I believe survivors of assault should be supported and their voices heard. Kirsten Gillibrand tweeted.
I mean, I guess we could pause it here for a second, kind of like take a look at how he's doing. I mean, he looks, for those of you who wonder, he doesn't look kind of just, he's not looking that sharp, but like if you look at just from a visual perspective, but the way he's answered, I mean, I think like he's definitely been coached. I'm sure there's probably people standing behind us like, never happened. Okay, stop talking now. Stop. Because his answers have been very, very short and seem to be coming back, obviously, the same point again, like she is right to come forward, but excuse me, I don't believe that she ever did this. So like that is something there, I think, for sure, that we have seen a very lot of from people. And he's also returning some of these same excuses that like time and time again men have used to defend against criticism that they've been inappropriate, like, oh well, you see kind of the same forces, but he has stopped short of areas in terms of like questioning her motive, and he has said though things like, well, I don't know why she's coming out now after all this time, which kind of is questioning her motive. kind of hand in hand there. So let's continue.
Do we believe women? Do we give them the opportunity to tell their story? We must be a country that says yes every time. They now both support you. Nancy Pelosi falls into this category too, as well as many other leaders in the Democratic Party. Are women to be believed? Are women to be believed unless it pertains to you?
Look, women are to be believed, given the benefit of the doubt. If they come forward and say something that they said happened to them, they should start off with the presumption they're telling the truth. Then you have to look at the circumstances and the facts. And the facts in this case do not exist. They never happened. And there's so many inconsistencies in what has been said in this case. So you just look at the facts. And I assure you, it did not happen. Period.
So he's coming out very strong, and he has made a lot of
hearings.
Oh, okay.
And if you agree with that, if that's what happened, why did that happen?
Because, look, the fact is that there's a lot of things of speeches I've made, positions I've taken, interviews that I did overseas with people, all of those things relating to my job. And the idea that they would all be made public in the fact while I was running for public office, they could be really taken out of context. The papers are position papers. They are documents that existed and that when I, for example, when I met with Putin or when I met with whomever, and all of that to be fodder in a campaign at this time, I don't know of anybody who's done anything like that. And so the National Archives is the only place there would be anything having to do with personnel records. There are no personnel records in the Biden papers at the university.
So personnel records aside, are you certain there was nothing about Tara Reid in those records? And if so,
I am absolutely certain.
Why not approve a search of her name in those records?
Approve a search of her name?
Yes, and reveal anything that might be related to Tara Reid in the University of Delaware records.
There is nothing. They wouldn't. They're not there. And if it's
like, how do you know that? And I think we're very getting close to getting angry Grandpa Biden instead of cool Uncle Joe right here. Getting very close.
The point I'm trying to make is,
why aren't you listening here, doll? There's no personnel records in my University of Delaware store here.
I'm asking why not do the same in the University of Delaware records, which have raised
and credit for them just having Mika answer. She's asked all the questions here through like 18 minutes.
Period of time. Why not do it for both sets of records?
Because
she's like, I'll repeat it
louder. In the University of Delaware has no personnel files, but it does have a lot of confidential conversations that I had with the president about a particular issue, that I had with the heads of state of other places, that would not be something that would be revealed.
Pretty much the idea is, like, regardless whether there is Tara Reid files in there or not, like, there's a bunch of other stuff that the Republicans could be used to hit him with. That's kind of the overwhelming fear that he has in terms of releasing these. But of course, as Mika says, like, why don't they just search and release all documents pertaining to Tara Reid if there is any? But the good thing I think Mika's doing here is getting him on the record to say a lot of different things that could come back to haunt him later.
With the president or anybody else, I'm just asking, why not do a search for Tara Reid's name in the University of Delaware records?
Why not? And the release from the archives too.
Look, I mean, who does that search?
The University of Delaware. Perhaps you set up a commission that can do it. I don't know. Whatever is the fairest way to create the most transparency.
Well, look.
She does look very pained in this.
She said she filed
a report.
Pained.
You can't see it, but she looks very pained.
Records still. She said she refiled a report with the only office that would have a report in the United States Senate at the time. If the report was ever filed, it was filed there. Period.
If you could speak directly to Tara Reid about her claims or anything, what would you say?
I would. This never, ever happened. I don't know what is motivating her. I don't know what's behind any of it. But it's irrelevant. It never happened. It never happened. Period. I'm not going to start questioning her motive. I'm not going to get into that. I'm not going to go after Tara Reid for saying these things. It's simple. What are the facts? Do any of the things she said, do they add up? They never happened.
Mr. Vice President, stay with us. We're going to take a 1-minute break, and then Joe and Willie will join with questions on other news of the day. We're back with the former Vice President Joe Biden in 1 minute.
All right, so they're going to be back in about 1 minute with Joe Biden, apparently, so we will be back there for sure. Sagar and Jetty, just looking at him on Twitter right now, Mika is doing a good job here, but why not bringing up corroborating evidence vis-a-vis Christine Blasey Ford every time he dodges a Kavanaugh question? That's from Sagar and Jetty over the hills rising. I think he's definitely got a very good point. Like, he's not bringing up this corroborating evidence here, which I think could be a really good point to ask him about. Like, there is a lot of corroborating evidence where there wasn't with Christine Blasey Ford. How does that pertain to the believability case? And what do you have to say about, all those people who are, in fact, actually coming out and corroborating a story, even though they may not be his staffers, maybe they have good close connections to him. Like, we don't know. Like, how about all the people, all the sources, all the things that have come out in terms of corroboration? So the Democratic Party had 4 years to understand the economic hardship and massive levels of inequality in this nation. And the best they have to offer right now is Trump is bad. We all know Trump is bad. That's like seeing the sky is blue. What are Democrats fighting for? That's another reaction from today from a popular progressive tweeter. Yeah, and you can see the reactions here. Mika is now the number one trend. The name Mika is the number one trend on Twitter as we start with this Joe Biden interview again.
If you are elected president in November, then chances are very good, if Dr. Fauci and other doctors are right, you are going to be sitting in the Oval Office when this pandemic comes back again in the middle of flu season. How should America prepare for the second wave that Dr. Fauci says could be even worse than the first?
We should be preparing now. Look, Joe, one of the things I've said from the beginning, the president should empower a supply officer, someone who is in charge of making sure that all the material needed, all the PPP, all the testing, all the things we know we have to get done are getting done. And create the Defense Production Act and make sure that we also deal with the banking side of this, to make sure all the things that, in fact, the Congress, the several trillion dollars they put out there to help businesses, small businesses stay alive, actually get to small business. I'd also establish a pandemic testing board to finally solve the testing problem. I'd open up a new enrollment period for health care. I would also, some early data shows African Americans and communities of color have contracted this disease and died at alarming rates. And I get economic relief quickly as we can to those most in need to diminish the impact of this. But we have to have that material, Joe. We have to have everything from enough swabs to the reagents, to the testing capacity, to masks, to gloves, and he's going so slowly on this.
How do you speed up testing? The president says.
All right, yeah, so that's kind of, they're talking about the news of the day. Biden kind of giving what we assume to be pretty much the pat Democratic response on this thing, like let's do more healthcare, like let's open up the enrollment period for healthcare and do more testing, like pretty much the bold Democratic ideas that we kind of come to expect here, right? So we kind of get the sense we could kind of move on from that to a degree and kind of take in what we just saw here. I would say that Mika did do a pretty good job. I think the only biggest regret, like kind of where I would have pressed maybe a little bit more, was the fact that, yes, there was corroborating influence. I just do not get here by the mainstream media this insistence on always refusing to acknowledge people. And I mean, I guess I kind of do. There's definitely an explanation for it, but they refuse to acknowledge the fact that they were beaten on this story when they could have easily had it, because it implicitly implies that for so long they try to cover up this story. And they try to downplay